Brian's been real involved with us all year, and we'll let him tell his story. Give it up for Brian, everybody. Make him feel at home up here.
Alright, so you guys know that you're out there dancing for a great organization, Stand Up for Kids. There are 1.3 million homeless and street kids in America today. They all have a story, but I can only tell you mine, and that's what I'm going to do. When I was 15 years old, I ran away from my dad's house in Arkansas and hitchhiked to California. I moved into my... Dang, sorry. I moved into my mom's house, but it turned out that her roommate liked young boys. So, a couple of weeks after I got to California, I was living on the streets. For the next 6 years, from 15 to 21, I lived on the streets of San Diego. I sold drugs, I stole, I did whatever I had to do to survive. I started doing meth at 16 because it just made it easier to not eat, not sleep. You know, it just made it was a coping mechanism for me. After I started doing meth, I started cutting myself, which seemed like a good release at the time. Eventually, that went a little further, turned into suicide attempts. Twice in the six years I was on the streets, I was clinically dead because I tried to kill myself. Living on the streets like being in a war zone. You know, you hear post-traumatic stress disorder and you usually think veterans. But the kids living out there on the streets right now, they're going through that every day. You know, they're invisible kids. Nobody sees them. I was 15 years old the first time I came in contact with Stand Up for Kids. The first person I met, you actually met earlier tonight, Rick Kocha. I saw him walking up, and you know, he had the purple shirt on. Honestly, my first thought was, oh, it's another pedophile. Because you gotta watch out for that on the streets. But he really surprised me by walking up to me. And the first thing he asked me was how long it had been since I talked to my parents. And then he handed me his cell phone. Over the next couple of months, every week, same time, Rick would come out there and talk to me. And, you know, when you're living on the streets, you're in a constant state of high alert. You gotta watch out for cops, you gotta watch out for the homeless adults, you gotta watch out for pedophiles. So it took 5 or 6 months before I actually started to trust Rick and Stand Up. Through the 6 years that I was living on the streets, the one person I could count on to get on my case, if I showed up high, or if I showed up with new cuts on my arm, was always the counselors from Stand Up. You know, they held me accountable, even though at that time I was shooting up meth, I was starting to do heroin. And by getting on my case, I realized that they cared about me. Because anybody can walk out and give you a pack of food and a pair of socks and just walk off. But Rick would sit down on the sidewalk with me like I was his equal, which wasn't the way I felt. But he would sit there and talk to me as long as I needed to talk. That was 15 years ago. Over the next 6 years, I think Stand Up sent me home to Arkansas like 8 times. And I would always end up back in San Diego. because I knew it was bad for me, but that's where my friends were, that's where my drug connects were. But every time I went to Rick and told him I wanted to go home, he'd buy me the bus ticket. He would jump all over me when he'd come out a couple of weeks later and see me on the streets again, but he never gave up on me. And so, after I'd started doing heroin, I realized that if I didn't stop, I was going to end up just another statistic. You know, I was going to end up dead in the gutter. So I went to Rick, and I said, my girlfriend's pregnant, I've started using heroin, I want to go home. He put me on a Greyhound with my girlfriend, and that was 9 years ago. Since then, I haven't spent another night on the streets. Kids die on the streets every day from abuse, disease, and suicide. Because of organizations like Stand Up, those kids are getting the people they need to talk to. And they're getting stuff to help them through a day. Because you have to take life one day at a time on the streets. It's really hard to look ahead when every day you wake up sleeping in a tent in the riverbed. So when I look out at you guys and gals and see you guys out here dancing for 30 hours for kids you've never met, it amazes me. You know, I want to thank Team Exec for putting on an amazing event. And I want to thank each and every one of you for doing what you're doing. I mean, I know it's out there, I know it's fun being out there dancing to all these great songs, but you're also out there helping these 1.3 million kids. And it really does me good to see the kindness and selflessness that's out there in America today. People are finally realizing we have this problem and doing something about it. So thank you.
Give it up for Brian, everybody. Give it up for him. Everybody, that's why we're dancing right there.
That is why. If you get
13
tired
kids
at all,
don't have to die every day. Those millions don't have to be homeless. We're doing a song about it tonight. So when you party with a purpose. That's right, Wade.
we partying with a purpose tonight, y'all. So you stay with me. We're gonna tell DJ Sims to pump that jam on 3. 1, 2, 3, pump that jam!